Welcome to the presentation, Integrating Educational Apps into Classroom Instruction. My name is Rachel Karchmer-Klein. Historically, literacy pedagogy has been interpreted in relation to static, one-dimensional, linguistic forms of traditionally printed text. In light of technological affordances, experts have recommended teachers adopt a new set of pedagogical practices that recognize the role of digital multimodality in classroom literacy instruction. There is a need for ongoing analysis of teaching in this context so that our pedagogical knowledge does not slip behind technological changes. The goal of re-envisioning pedagogical practices is to make technology integration an authentic, meaningful experience that identifies its affordances as literacy rather than a set of separate, decontextualized skills to be learned. When examining educational apps in the classroom, I believe we must frame it by the theory of recontextualization. Recontextualization is the notion that discourses transform as they move from one social practice to another. Van Leeuwen defines discourses as socially constructed ways of knowing some aspect of reality. As Beach does, we extend this view of recontextualization to reflect the discourses or social practices surrounding multimodal educational apps. This view recognizes differing opinions of what educational apps are and how they can be used in disciplinary literacy instruction. Software developers, for example, design apps with their own vision of technology and how it can be used in teaching and learning. Teachers, on the other hand, make decisions about how apps can be used in instruction based upon access, interest, time, learning objectives, and their own technological competencies. And of course, there are the students. They recontextualize apps based upon ways they imagine using them in schoolwork. I am most interested in the interplay between the affordances of educational apps and how teachers choose to integrate them. Additionally, when examining educational apps, I also draw upon the pedagogical processes approach forwarded by Clancis, Clunin, and Cope. This view posits knowledge informs the design of effective instruction. In their book Literacies, the authors describe 4 processes that represent ways in which knowledge is created: experiencing, conceptualizing, analyzing, and applying. Experiencing refers to exposure to new ideas and situations, as well as reflection upon prior knowledge. Conceptualizing refers to active thinking when learners make mental and theoretical connections between concepts. Analyzing requires learners to utilize what they experience to think critically by drawing inferences and conclusion. In essence, they extend basic content knowledge to make deeper meaning and connections. Applying refers to utilizing knowledge in real-world situations, immersing students in learning where they demonstrate understanding that conforms to culturally accepted conventions of representation and creative ways. Students may apply their knowledge by composing, planning, illustrating, or constructing representations of learning. Clancis et al. Point out that these processes are not separate or sequential knowledge domains. Instead, they represent a range from which teachers can design activities that will engage students in rich, meaningful making literacy opportunities. Research indicates a combination of these pedagogical processes can innovate content and support student learning, particularly when examining tech-based instruction. Ryan et al. State these 4 processes provide a systematic view of the complexities of teachers' planning and teaching role in the multimodal context. As a reminder from the previous presentation, in my work, I've identified 4 types of educational apps: content skill, presentation, organization, share, and hybrid apps. Much like a textbook, content apps directly relate to course curriculum, making them easy to infuse. Sorry about that. Since students many times will have their own device, they can work independently and continue practicing the skill at home. As I stated previously, many of these apps have game-like interfaces requiring users to beat the clock, play against opponents, or earn points. They also require users to complete different levels of difficulty and provide scaffolds to support learning when needed. Many teachers, in my experience, have described these apps as motivating and engaging. Furthermore, teachers use words like clarifying and modeling to describe how these types of apps further reinforce discipline-specific knowledge. From my experience, I have seen teachers design instruction that incorporate these types of apps in 3 ways. First, time is designated in class for students to explore and practice content with the apps. Second, I have seen teachers implement these apps within a flipped classroom model, which means they require students to watch the content-related videos or play skill-based games for homework. Then they come back to the classroom where rich, collaborative discussions take place. I've also observed teachers using these types of apps within a center environment where they're trying to differentiate instruction. That is, one group of students perhaps are using a content app to reinforce a particular skill. Another group is watching a video to repeatedly because they're struggling with a particular content area or a particular topic and they need that reinforcement. And perhaps there's a third center where the teacher is working independently or individually or with a small group of students. Presentation apps are interesting because they provide students with an opportunity to present what they've learned. iMovie is an example of this type of app. iMovie combines visual and audio representations with written and oral language. Students can use the app to create multimodal presentations. Sophisticated tactility is required during the shooting and editing of the movies. Teachers tend to describe them as useful for gauging how much a student knows and as interesting methods of getting students to represent what they learned. I have noticed 3 approaches to using presentation apps in the classroom. One is to get students to use the app to present knowledge to the teacher. So for example, the teacher asks a question and students respond individually on their presentation app, perhaps a whiteboard app, and then show their work to this teacher. A second way is this interactive communication between the teacher and the student. So the student, for example, responds to a prompt by the teacher, then the teacher uses the app to provide feedback. So you can actually, for example, add an audio comment within the presentation app, and then the student receives the presentation back, is able to see their work, as well as listen to their teacher providing constructive critique of the work. I've also seen students using apps to present and discuss their knowledge with other students. For example, in one classroom, students took on the role of expert and they provided tutorials to the rest of the class outlining a particular topic. Something that I strongly encourage is using a combination of apps. This is extremely powerful because all the different types of apps, if you take advantage and leverage all the different types of apps, there is a lot that can be done. One example is from a teacher named Matthew who conducted a Show Me Current Events video. There were 3 steps to this assignment. The first step was for the student to select a news story using the USA Today app, which is a content app, meaning that the students were identifying a story, they were reading it, and they were experiencing the knowledge for the first time by reading the topic. The second step was students would take notes on the news story using Pages, which is a presentation app, a way for them to note take and then also to create a storyboard of what they intended to do in their Show Me presentation. Step 3 was to create a Show Me video. The video would incorporate written language, audio, and visual representations to summarize the news story that they had identified on the content app. They would then send to the teacher their Show Me video using Dropbox, and then additionally they would use the Edmodo site, which is a password protected site, to share their work with their classmates. What was so interesting about this particular activity and why I wanted to share it with you is because not only does it use a combination of apps, it also incorporates a variety of pedagogical practices to support student learning. Kasdan calls this weaving. It's when you shift from one knowledge process to another and back to help students develop deeper meaning of content. For example, in that activity that I just described, the lesson began with the content app USA Today presenting information to the students who experienced the information when reading the multimodal text. The students then conceptualized and analyzed the current event by using a presentation app, Pages, to compose notes and create a storyboard using written language or a combination of written language and audio or visual representation. When composing this multimodal presentation, the teacher required students to critically frame their knowledge by developing those scripts and storyboards. These opportunities to make connections between the information solidified the content and scaffolded the students' response. The students then applied their knowledge creatively by composing multimodal text using the modal affordances of the second presentation app, which was Show Me. Finally, the teacher used the sharing capabilities of Edmodo, which is a secure social networking site, to transition the lesson from an individualized mobile learning activity to a socialized mobile learning activity by engaging the students in constructive critique of their classmates' work. On the following slides, you'll see the references I used in this presentation.